notice of motion. The first one implies that I was unaware of something that I made a decision on, and I'd like to state here and now that I was aware, I'd done my homework, and I was aware of the facts leading into this decision, so I'm pretty confident that I made a full informed decision, as I would expect each and every one of us around the table to have done. My second point is that this topic was brought up to my attention through the media, and I think it's really, really important that two facts here. Our debating's done around the council chamber in the first instance, not through the media. I think that's going to be the key to our success going forward, is a strong and vibrant council going forward, and continual debating through the media I don't think is healthy in advance, particularly in advance of discussions. And my other point is that, Peter, you've spoken on my behalf as one of the 6 new councillors to the media, and I think when we're talking about code of conduct, it's important to point out that that's against the code of conduct to be speaking on behalf of councillors. So this has raised a bit of a can of worms here, and I understand that there's a few emotions involved, but yeah, there's just another side of this debate to be looking at too.
Well, thank you for that. It's really interesting. If it's been in the media, it could have got in the media from exactly the same source that I got it from, which is on the street. On the street. Someone told me about it, which really surprised me. I didn't get this notice officially anywhere. I found out that there had been an increase. I made inquiries. I was told that it was done in a public excluded. I was offered to see the red paper, which was locked up in the chief executive's safe. I had to come in here and sit in the chief executive's room and ask for the safe to be opened and the paper to be put in front of me. And I feel hamstrung here because there is information in that paper which cannot be debated here, and to which you have alluded to and built your case on it. And so I am actually going to develop an argument with one hand tied behind my back, which frustrates me. But the point I want to come back to, due diligence, fair enough. Due diligence is important. But you have to have some awareness of things to be able to go and ask. I had no idea that this had been done in the public excluded and all the paperwork was locked in the chief executive's safe. Had I known that, I would have gone and asked. Now, on the other side of that, Chair, I don't think I have to rely on my own due diligence all the time. I expect people in a leadership position and the chief executive and you, if there's information about that you are aware of, to alert councillors to it. That's part of your responsibility. And to say that, oh, you didn't ask, which has been said in this council meeting before, oh, you didn't ask that question, I don't find a particularly helpful leadership style at all. The preponderance of this should be about openness and about transparency. Now, I'm with Peter here, and I do want to have some changes here. I think part of the problem here is that we take decisions in public excluded and do not have a considered discussion at the end of it as to what should be released or not. Now, in my view, the decision in September last year to award an increase to the chief executive should have been made public immediately thereafter. It's a decision. It's in the public domain. It's going to get into the public domain anyway. Why we hold them back, I have no idea. It's just unhelpful. Had it have been released in the public domain, there would be no issue, but it was not. So a number of us came to the discussion without that knowledge. And I'm with Peter in that I think it is highly relevant. I would have wanted to have known. I've checked with other people and I said if they were at an executive level and a staff member was given a pay increase, and a pay increase of some few months before had not been advised to the board, then the person taking the advice would have been fired. They felt really strongly about it, that they would not tolerate that. That's their view, and I have some sympathy with that. Now, you could make the argument to them that, well, it's your job as the board to have due diligence and make sure you're aware of these things, but they wouldn't accept that in the private sector. Something affects someone, all of the information is put on the table. It was not. I'm with Peter in that claiming it to be a higher duties allowance to me is an artificial construction to get around the issue. The fact is the money that he's paid on top of this is salary. It will be taxed away IRD as salary. It's as simple as that. Whether the difference between the port and HBRC, there is a significant difference. The port generates its own money. It pays its own staff, manages its own things. HBRC does not generate its own money. HBRC intercepts the money we have or we give to HBRC. It's effectively council money. And so I see it as quite different. The other thing which is important about this is that the council had made decisions previously about recognising the Ruataniwha water storage scheme effect. Those decisions were not part of the discussion we had in January. I think that was a wrong, and we should have been advised of that. Had we have been advised of that, we would have then known to ask other questions. I think in the future, when we make decisions like this, we should tie them to the previous decisions. So noting the decision of such and such, we then go. So then council can say, oh, well, there's a previous decision. I can go back and check on that. I can inform myself. But if the system doesn't alert us to them, then we don't have that opportunity. I think it would have made a difference. But however, what your argument, Chair, that you don't think it would have made a difference, I think is irrelevant. Because what you're trying to say there is that you have the ability to censor information which you think is relevant or not. And I say it shouldn't be. I say the information should be all plain and open, and it's up to council themselves to make the decision as to whether it's relevant or not, whether it influences them or not. Not for others to say, on my behalf or others' behalf. And I take you back to the example of the water contract that Councillors Beaven and Graham have asked for the information. This organisation should be completely open with information. It's a public entity. And if Councillor Graham and Councillor Belford want to go to bed at night and read a water contract, well, knock them out. If Councillor Graham wants to be buried in figures on his business case, give it to him. When you don't, or when the entity doesn't give it to him, it makes me nervous, because I think, why? Transparency and openness should be our hallmark.
Chairman, I'm going to raise a point of order. We've got a motion in front of us which has got nothing to do with water contracts or anything else.
He's talking about the principle, and he's almost had his 5 minutes, but that's fine.
Yeah, thank you. That's my point. I think we should be open on this, and I think there's two things that I would suggest from here. In the future, the motions which are linked to things which happened before, the linkage should be made clear. Secondly, that when we go into public excluded, there should be a discussion at the conclusion of those things, what is going to be released, and make a considered decision to release them. And things like salary increases for seafood technicians should be done automatically, because they're going to be released in some form or other anyway. And we should have the complete preponderance towards openness and transparency. I think that's where we've failed.
Two very useful comments there. Any other speakers?
So a couple of points of clarification. I just want to correct Councillor Barker. It was in a coffee shop, not on the streets, that we were told this information. We were a little bit blown away when somebody came up to us and said, "Did you know?" Well, if it's expected that on every issue that we have to read all the past notes, or I just find that quite extraordinary. And I also find it extraordinary that Councillor Hewitt had the foresight to ring the Chief Executive and say, "Can I have a look in your safe at all those red files that were in her safe and nowhere else?" Well, I didn't, so I'm incredibly impressed with that, because I didn't. It would have been useful to have that information, sure. Would it have made any difference? Probably not, because the vote was 5-4 at the time, if I recall. So it probably all would have happened anyway. But it is a matter of process and systems, and I think it's incumbent on us to look at those and see how we can improve them.
Councillor Scott. Oh, Councillor Belford.
Well, I would just like to comment on very briefly on the broader implication of this. We've been asked in our lengthy previous debate this morning, the issue of trust kept arising, and as was just said, I don't believe that it is incumbent on me to try to dig into every previous decision, especially public excluded decisions, to try to ferret out information that I think I should be given as a matter of course to make an intelligent decision that's being put before me. This little bit of history here was totally relevant information for us to know about, and it's not the sort of thing that I believe we should be expected to have had the insight, foresight, whatever you want to call it, to think, oh, maybe they made a decision on this some other time, and maybe it was made in public excluded, maybe we should look into what the details were, maybe it was a performance evaluation at the time, maybe we should look at that. So to me, the handling of this is just, it's what I regard as endemic in the way the senior staff here and some of the leadership operates across the board when they are trying to push something forward.
Yeah, no, I'll stop you there.
And that's what this means to me.
Okay, but this is not about senior staff. You fire your shots at me, not at them. Anyone else? I think I can take one more.
Mr. Chairman, I do actually speak in support of the motion, and I'm delighted that my fellow councillors hopefully have learnt that the review of the performance review of the CEO, and of course with that a consideration of remuneration is an annual event. So going forward, I really apologise. I didn't know that this was an annual event, but now they will. And this is something that had to be done. It was a duty of the previous council to do it. I think they might have been slightly late in doing it, but because I have a suspicion the date is around about July that it's normally done. However, it was needing to be done. And so, yes, we did at that meeting consider the performance and adjust the salary in keeping with that, which is standard practice. To go forward to the consideration of the higher duties allowance, and as it's been termed, or has been termed, and the relevance of a previous performance review is actually immaterial. There is no connection. HBRC brought back a recommendation on a job sizing. It wasn't based on a percentage increase or anything else. They'd sized his job, his responsibilities, his workload, and all of those factors, and they came back with what is probably within that job sizing something that was towards a fairly conservative remuneration at that type of job.
Point of order. Point of order. What we're looking at here is the process. And I thought your instruction to us again, was to keep away the content of it, the thing.
Upheld.
And if it had been allowed to be there, I would have got stuck in that issue too. And I just feel that we're now moving on to something else we were told us not to.
We talked, yeah, absolutely, but there was others that touched on it. But
Yeah.
moderate,
Yep.
please. Yeah.
I'm merely saying that that decision was based on totally separate information than was what was brought for the performance review as a CEO of this council. And I don't think there is anything relevant in that affected the considerations in 2014 that was made by this council. I would actually say that once a decision on a review of the CEO is done, then that remuneration is then published in the annual report as a standard practice. And that is what is always done. It is a usual position with businesses to do that, and it is a position of councils as well to do that. So this is a perfectly standard procedure of reviewing his salary back by the previous council, and I believe it was quite irrelevant to a decision that was then later made by the recommendation of RWSS.
Councillor Dick, we might as well go around the room.
I'll be very brief. I think this is storm and teacup. I'm a bit concerned about some of the motivations behind it, but I'll just recount my experience. When I came back here in 2004, I asked for the council's minutes of the council meeting in open and in committee for the past 12 months. I sat down and went through those. It took about 2 hours. I asked a few questions, and that was my starting point. And I would suggest that if others, new councillors, haven't yet done that, that they do it soon.
Mr. Summer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess I'm a victim of my legal training because I approach things on the basis of what is reasonable, and I would have thought that a reasonable person would consider that a salary adjustment that was awarded only 4 months before January, when we discussed it as a new council, would have had some relevance to our decision making. So there's no point in me, I think, going back over the ground that's been covered by councillors, and everybody's had a say, I think, except Councillor Pipe on this. Suffice to say that I would much rather be looking forward and make sure that we've got good and sensible processes in place so that we don't ever have to have a discussion like this again, Chair.
Fully endorse those final comments. I'll put the motion, and all those in favour please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. And thank you, Councillor Beaven. Thank you. Righto.